Gundam.tk presents High Grade Gundam Age-3 Normal. Hey, what's up again, everybody? It's Robert184, 2Rs, 2Bs, Gundam Reviews.net, and as the Age-1 hops into the picture and the non-transformed Age-2, if you've seen the previous parts, you've seen the Age-3 unboxed and the mobile suit mode and transformed here into the G-Scepter. Anyway, it's time for the good and bad stuff so that you can make a call whether you want to add this to your Age or HG collection. So to keep it in G-Scepter mode, because I gotta say that this is the lesser of the two, in terms of some of the negatives that I picked out for this, first of all, when you put it together, there are some moving parts, and I'm talking here specifically about the knees and the front of the ankle guards, and they move, but they really don't move as much as you'd expect. If Bandai's gonna go to the trouble to make those movable parts, you'd think they'd give them a better range of motion, and you could just do a little bit more with them than what you can see right now. Also, for the chest part, when you actually put this whole thing on, it's going to have those little hollow parts there, if you can make it out between the white and the blue there. It is going to look okay because it sort of makes it look a little bit mechanical when you put in the gray part there for the removable chest and head section. However, at the same time, it's just the kind of thing where it probably should have been covered up, I suppose. But then again, it is sort of keeping with this blue part being its triangular shape, being whatever you want to call this little vehicle here that's going to be flying everything everywhere. Well, not a vehicle, part of the body, I suppose. The beam sabers themselves, if you want to get them out of the forearm parts, it's going to be a little bit tricky, so a modeler's knife, or you're just going to have to wiggle them back and forth until one end pops out enough. We've seen them better beam saber removal mechanisms in some of the other kits in Age, can't remember which ones off the top of my head. But anyway, it just would have been nicer if this was a little bit easier, because otherwise you're just sort of inclined to plug them in and use them unicorn style as opposed to putting them in the hand. Even though I think in the hand ones, especially if you look at the promo images, are the ones that are going to look a little bit better. The transformation, well, what do you say? Well, for me, this is just going to be so-so. A lot of people do not like swapping parts out, so if you have to take off the chest and replace it with this pseudo chest here, some people wouldn't like to keep that around. A Ziploc would be handy to keep this kind of thing. But for me, the G-Scepter, it's just sort of bent over. The arms, you hardly move anything at all. The legs, outside of moving the feet 90 degrees and bending the legs 90 degrees and swapping the part, there's not much to it. The flaps themselves on the arms, when it's in MS mode, you could have moved those around a little bit more, and it would have been sort of neat if they had sort of allowed a little bit more independent movement of the shoulders just so you could get the arms and the shoulders both posed dynamically. It does a good job, just not as the best job that you'd sort of expect. 45-degree angle would be a little bit better to expand on down below. And my final complaint, and this may just be me, but so far he just seems a little bit skinny for my taste compared to the Age-2, where he's not going to look that much more bulky. And if you looked at RX-78-2 to Zeta to Double Zeta, they really increased in size. This one just doesn't seem to show it, even though in the anime, every time they show him, he's looking like a monster. The model is going to be skinny, although that's certainly probably going to meet some people's preferences, just in this case, not mine. But is it all bad? Far from it. There's still so many positives about this, and it's just a question of whether they outweigh the negatives for you. First of all, let's start with the price. 1,600 yen for a big transforming Gundam with 6 very interestingly colored plates. No issues at all whatsoever with the price compared to what we've seen for the other HG Age kits. This one is certainly worth the extra money for all the extra plastic that you're going to be getting. And one thing, I'm a big fan of the color scheme of this guy. He is very Double Zeta-ish, and the Double Zeta had a lot more color in the legs. But having those little touches like the yellow down here and the yellow up on the shoulders, I think that's great. These thrusters, you are going to notice it from the sides or from the back certainly, and a little bit from the front. And especially when you look up at the head, and the big part for me for the colors is that blue and white part there. That just brings this whole thing to life for me when you put on that A for Age underneath it. In terms of playability, yes, he's got the beam sabers, and that's a lot of fun. You can have them in 4 different ways, I suppose. You have the extra dynamic hand, which is great, and you can also stow that away. And he's incredibly easy to put him together. He's a fun build. Everything about him, from the legs to the arms, to the panels, the way they're going to fit on there, these forearm guards, the Sigmasa's rifle, everything about the chest especially. When I was putting it together, I was excited to see what the end result was, and that's what you want as a builder. Whenever you're putting something together, is to be anticipating what you're going to be getting at the end, because putting it together is half the fun. The posability, he is fairly dynamic, not going to have any issues with the knee bends, elbow bends, the ankles are going to get you wherever you want to go. Combine that with the fact that he doesn't have a lot of weight issues so far, none whatsoever for me, is fantastic, especially considering the size of this gun that he's packing over here in his right arm. Not collapsing, that's a great thing. And speaking of this, it's sort of cool that it came on its own plate because it's a big bulky beast, and I'd say that it's got lots of playability. It can attach onto the back of the MS, it can attach on to the G-Scepter when it's there, and it's going to look good, especially with that barrel and the green seal underneath. That's pretty cool. One other thing I should have added to the negatives, though, is that they could have put some seals under the clear green, but nonetheless, they gave us the clear green, and when you move on to the transformation, yes, it's easy, and the extra parts are useful. I'm a big fan of this. It's going to look a little bit cheesy, but then again, it keeps enough of the chest parts there that you can recognize it for what it is. They went to the extra trouble to put on these raised shoulders, etc. I actually like this, even though it is a little bit of a parts former. It's easy, it looks okay, so that's acceptable, but the winner for me has to be that core fighter there. The clear green parts, as I mentioned on both of them, are certainly going to be a big help, but I think this is one of the cooler core fighters that we've seen in Gundam. It's not going to dock in the chest. That would be too hard to see, I'd imagine, with a 1/144th. I can't imagine a crossbone or something doing that, especially on a smaller MS. With this one, though, I look forward to more H3s and more core fighters because they're all going to look good on the back, and I'd say it's a big step up on the old race car spoiler, but then again, maybe that's just me. And especially one of the best things about this kit for me is just this head and chest section. As I mentioned, the colors, the transformation, putting it together, but it's the head details itself. 2 white parts, that's pretty dull, but you've got the red part for the goatee and under the eyes, but it's that red jewel on the top with that very cool looking yellow V fin and the blue one, which is going to cut. They've got some fantastic engineering here to get it as close together with no separation whatsoever. It's going to look great on a 1/144th, and I can imagine it's only going to look better once it gets a master grade. Older school Gundam, you know that there would have been a lot of seals involved, but instead doing it all in plastic. Well done, MS designers and the plastic magicians at Bandai. And just as I'm about to say my final verdict, a little bit of weight issues once he gets up here. The body is sort of going to collapse forward. Of course, you could stop that by just having him stand straight up. But the arm was collapsing with that Shigmasa's rifle. So far, 9 out of 10 poses, he's been okay, but it looks like there may be issues. But I digress, and on to the main verdict. What am I going to say about this? Well, as a double Zeta homage, I think it looks great. As a successor to the Age-1 and the Age-2 at RX-78-2 and the Zeta, I think that it looks great. It's powerful, it's posable, it's fun to put together, and pretty much that's really all you need for Gundam, and it's a lead, so let's not forget that. In my books, it's certainly going to give it a plus. The only disappointment I'd say is that he's just not the big bulky monster that I envisioned, so maybe that's just me looking at the line art wrong and looking at all the cool poses wrong. Anyway, what's your impression? Is he looking just right in terms of proportions and size? A little bit disappointing. Anyway, having the 3 of them together and having this one being this much fun to put together and looking this cool in the majority of his poses, outside of the so-so transformation, for me makes him more than a winner. But on to the always fun future speculation. We've already got advanced grades for all 3 of its wares, and we're going to be getting high grades of the orbital. I'm sure we're going to be getting the fortress along the way. Master grades, we're getting the Age-2 normal, so the Age-3 normal is all but guaranteed. It's just a question of whether we'll be getting MGs of all the other wares as well, I suppose, although they've done a great job so far with the Age-1. Ultimately, the big question is going to be whether it's going to get a 1/48th mega-size model. We've already got the Age-1, which seemed to do well enough that they put out the Age-2, which we've seen no hide nor hair of an Age-3 at the Shizuoka Hobby Show or anywhere else. So you wonder if having something like that for $9,500 or whatever it would have to cost, sitting on retailers' shelves is just a little bit too much for them, and Bandai decided not to go in that direction. In the meantime, of course, I'm going to be anxiously awaiting the Master Grade. I was speculating December-ish for its release based on the August release of the Age-2. Anyway, why don't you let me know what kind of kits you'd like to see of this? Is this enough? Do you want to pick up more wares in high grade, advanced grade, and anything else? Anyway, love to hear from you what you think about the verdict, the MS, and everything else with a comment down below. Anyway, everybody, this was a new lead Gundam. I'm very excited. Can't wait to get it in 1/100th, so of course, stick around for that, and lots more news, reviews, and everything else you can use. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time. You know, with no Asano family in their way, the Vegans would have taken over the whole solar system by now.